I didn't want to have to make this video. I'll just get it right out and say it. I'm done making Nickjune videos. I know a lot of you are probably a little confused, angry, a little thirsty, and for that, I'm sorry. I think the idea's just run its course. I mean, I've done everything I can with the format. We've had a lot of good times, from classic videos like the SpongeBob movie game to my more controversial videos like the SpongeBob movie game to even my most viewed video, that's right, the SpongeBob movie game. But I'm done. I want to move on and I want to make the content that I want to see, and to do that, I'm introducing a brand new theme month, Cartjune Network! That's right, for the rest of the month of June, we're going to be looking at only Cartoon Network games, and this time I mean it! What better way to start off the long-running Cartjune Network than to start with the big shot of the channel? No, not that one. No, not that one. Not that one either. No, I mean, yes! So a little background on the channel and Ed and Eddy as a whole. Cartoon Network was started in 1992 by Ted Turner. Yes, he looks like a guy at a bus stop who sells hard candies, but you're wrong, he's responsible for most television. A whole nother video would have to be made just to cover what drug-fueled benders Teddy got up to when people weren't looking, but to give you an idea, people who looked like this gave him the nickname Captain Outrageous. You know you're doing something right when you get a nickname like that.
Protect the environment, or I'll kill you!
Starting off his life on the right foot by getting kicked out of college for bringing a girl into his room. Man's down to clown, I don't see the issue. He sold several radio stations he owned to buy a struggling TV station, which he decided to make work in the most. Of course that worked! Way possible, by playing shows like Gilligan's Island and I Love Lucy, and having a comedian named Bill Tush read off the news with his co-host, a dog wearing a shirt. Beats the fuck out of a mime. Clearly they had found a winning formula, earning the rights to show the major Atlanta-based baseball team's games, getting broadcast via satellite, and amassing a fortune of over $100 million. Ted was flying high and decided to strike it out with a new idea. What if there was a channel that never stopped? That's where the cable news network came in. CNN was a channel that had wall-to-wall news coverage 24 hours a day. Now, contrary to popular belief, things don't stop happening when you stop looking at them, so there's always going to be news, and CNN found an audience. But Ted wasn't done yet. Why would you make a channel all about how horrible everything is, if not to counteract it with a channel where you could watch Scooby-Doo eat a big sandwich? Yeah, it only took 497 words to get to cartoons in this video. So, the early stages of Cartoon Network's history is like a horrible Ouroboros where companies just kept eating each other, regurgitating the remains, and then eating those remains. If you ever thought history needed to be more like the turducken, you're in luck. So, Turner had managed to close a deal which secured him the rights to all Looney Tunes cartoons made before 1948, because in 1956, Warner Brothers sold them to a company who gives a fuck who they were, because they were bought by United Artists, who were bought by MGM, who were then bought by Turner, who spat back out MGM after taking their backlog. Now, that backlog was mainly for classic movies for channels like Turner Classic Movies, but adding MGM to the lineup meant they now had the MGM cartoons alongside the Looney Tunes, like Tom and Jerry. After that, in 1991, he bought Hanna-Barbera, who actually made cartoons like Flintstones, Jetsons, Yogi Bear, Sinbad Jr. and His Magical Belt, and lesser-known cartoons. So in terms of cartoons, Ted Turner was kind of an unstoppable god king who had gone to every major studio and poached their best stuff. MGM, Warner Bros, Hanna-Barbera. He picked up Popeye along the way because he was pretty much just short at Disney of controlling the entire Western animation industry. Some perspective on how much he really owned: Ted Turner at one point owned over 60% of all theatrical animated shorts thanks to his purchases. So now he probably had to do something with it all. The solution? Well, take the model that worked with CNN and apply it to cartoons. Ted put all 9,000 hours of animation he had to good use, as there was now a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week channel dedicated to showing what was essentially a really nice trophy cabinet. This started the first era of Cartoon Network, helmed by Betty Cohen. This was a time of experimentation, one helped by the fact that they had a massive safety net. Nicktoons was constantly hard up for content. There was only so many times they could show this lanky fucker before people started to get bored. Cartoon Network did not have that problem. No need to produce your own content right out of the gate. Remember, over 9,000 hours of backlog, and tons of free advertising on the other Turner networks. TNT specifically would occasionally just air whatever Cartoon Network was as a way to drum up support, with a great logo, unique channel bumpers, never forget what they took from us, and shows that people actually wanted to watch that you couldn't watch anywhere else. This led to Cartoon Network outdrawing CNN. Yeah, big fire down at the warehouse. Huckleberry Hound's on. 1993 marked the first original cartoon, The Moxie Show. Would you look at that? It's certainly moving, and if it moves, we can kill it. The new first original cartoon was Space Ghost Coast to Coast, which okay, you can't really call it original if you're reusing old footage. What Space Ghost was a fake talk show that reused old cartoon assets to make something that was oddly biting and different for the time it was released in.
But you're supposed to be in jail.
Yeah, and you're supposed to be dumpster diving for ham scraps, you six-piece chicken McNobody. Get out of my seat!
After about 2 more years, Cartoon Network would create one of its most important shows, What a Cartoon! I talked before in the last video about how creator-driven animation was in vogue. Well, nothing matched the freedom of What a Cartoon. No restrictions, no boundaries, just don't show a cock and we're groovy. This next part is gonna make a lot more sense if you're an animation nerd like me, so everybody else just tune out. This series acted as the start for titans of the industry like Craig McCracken, Gendy Tartakovsky, Rob Rigzetti, and God's Strongest Soldier, John Dilworth, and Seth MacFarlane. From this show came the heaviest of heavy hitters, Dexter's Laboratory, Powerpuff Girls, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Cow and Chicken, Johnny Bravo, cartoons for cartoon's sake. Remove a few more words from that last line and you have the perfect name, Cartoon Cartoons. They were riding high with the best lineup of cartoons save for Nickelodeon, and it would get even better in 1997 with the introduction of Toonami. See, up until this point, we had managed to keep anime trapped in Japan where it belonged. Sadly, somehow the hull had been breached, and now under cover of darkness, you could watch Goku achieve a Super Saiyajin in the shame of your own home. Nah, but it's definitely responsible for taking Japanese animation from the tape trading circuit into mainstream, but it's definitely responsible in some way, shape, or form for Danganronpa, so I'll never forgive and forget. With all the new original products, they had to do something with the old MGM and Hanna-Barbera cartoons, since it's not like people didn't want to watch them anymore, so they created Boomerang, a really nice name for the old Fogies channel. Things took a bit of a shift as Betty Cohen, the president I mentioned earlier who signed off on all this creator-driven content, was gone, replaced with Jim Samples. Jimmy is the tube sock of Cartoon Network presidents. He didn't do anything wrong, but he sure didn't rock the boat in any meaningful way. He's the Martin Van Buren of Cartoon Network presidents. He did some good, like introducing Adult Swim on September 2nd, 2001, one day after my first birthday, and 9 days before— Whoa, I am so sorry to steal your thunder, guys. It was a block that catered to more adult cartoon fans, as they recognized they were just as valid a market as the younger group. This is not only where Toonami would live from now on, but would also be the home to original content like Tim and Eric Awesome Show, Great Job, and the Venture Bros, but also shows in a similar vein to the original lineup like Aqua Team Hunger Force.
A lot of y'all still don't get it. Ape holders can use multiple slurp juices on a single ape.
At the same time, Jim was also responsible for the beginning of letting real people onto the network. They'd always dabbled with having flesh and blood appear on the channel with shows like Space Ghost, but those were real people in a cartoon world. Reanimated and out of Jimmy's head were cartoons in the real people world. So it sort of evens out in terms of damage done. For every out of Jimmy's head, you greenlit Rick and Morty, and you know what? Big net negative. This is your fault. Speaking of net negatives, in came Stuart Snyder, new president of Cartoon Network and killer of all happiness. See, for the championship reign of Jim Samples, there were cartoons like Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy, Samurai Jack, Star Wars The Clone Wars, Megas XLR, Chowder. It was still a great time to be a cartoon fan. But you know what Cartoon Network was always missing? Not cartoons! Ah, fuck me, it's the guy who made the Hellsing Ultimate Abridged opening. CN Real was a programming block which saw all the good work the Cartoon Network had been doing for the past 2 decades and decided it wasn't bad enough and course corrected. These were shows that tried to play catch up with what Disney and Nick were doing for at least the past 10 years, and to say it went well would be what an evil Mirror Jack would say to trick you. Of the original lineup of live action shows, 2 survived the year they debuted in, and some barely survived the month. Chin up, sport, you could be Brain Rush. No, but really, there's this show called Bob E. Says, and it ran for, I'm not kidding you, from August 19th, 2009 to September 13th, 2009. That's not a show run, that's a long fever. This was a massive miss in terms of knowing what your audience wants, with people turning out in droves, with the only new cartoons being made during the same time period being Ben 10 Alien Force and The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, which, in all fairness, is basically responsible for every cartoon nowadays that you like. However, come 2010 and Cartoon Network realized that dirt didn't taste as good as they thought it did and shifted back into the cartoon making scene. Suddenly a new wave of shows was started, like Adventure Time, Regular Show, Gumball, Steven Universe, Clarence, We Bare Bears, even experimental short-run series like Over the Garden Wall. These were shows that went back to the idea of creator-driven content, and those shows were followed up with shows like OKKO, Summer Camp Island, Craig of the Creek, Mau Mau, Infinity Train. Cartoon Network has really picked itself up from being the only if it's playing Camp Lazlo channel into being the I don't even watch TV anymore channel. And while they've certainly certainly had some misfires, like bringing back Powerpuff Girls without the original creator, and
If you need someone to sing so bad, you do it! No me gusta!
I will not get mad at a kid's show. I will not get mad at a kid's show. I'm 21. I will not get mad at a kid's... I'm mad anyway! Things could be a lot worse. While not as prolific as SpongeBob was to Nick, it's not up for debate that Ed, Edd, and Eddy wasn't a tentpole for Cartjune Network. There's a reason this was the last of the class of the cartoon cartoons to kick the bucket. This was a show created by Danny Antonucci, a Canadian animator who found work in the 80s working on shows like The Richie Rich and Scooby-Doo Show, The Flintstones Comedy Hour, and The Smurfs. Can you not see the influence in his later work? If you look closely, Papa Smurf is right there! Danny got the chance to make his work his way by creating short films like Lupo the Butcher, doing work on the cult classic Heavy Metal, and creating the MTV show The Brothers Grunt. Now, this show was regarded as both one of the ugliest and worst animated shows ever, to such a degree that I don't want to make you see it in motion. If I didn't edit these videos myself, I'd probably just make someone else look at it, but I'm a one-man band, so I'm taking it easy on myself. If you had to describe Danny's art style in a single word, I think brutal is the right word. Brutal in intensity, brutal in subject matter, brutal to watch. His art is incredibly chaotic, and if this makes any sense, a very controlled mess. It's all over the place, but it's meant to be, so that's not really a knock. But how does the guy who made this end up making a kid's show? Well, the same way any great creation is made. Spite! Yeah, the strongest force in the world isn't love. It's spite. After feeling like he had been pigeonholed as an edgy artist, Danny sought out to make a children's show just to prove he could. After Nick wanted too much creative control, he dragged it over to Cartjune Network and was greeted with a resounding, "We'll give you whatever you want, just get out!" Thus, Ed, Edd, and Eddy was born. While the other cartoons were by no means sanitized kids shows, I mean, Cow and Chicken literally had carpet-munching biker lesbians in an episode, Ed, Edd, and Eddy felt just as chaotic as Lupo the Butcher and the Brothers Grunt while also being a lot of fun. Its instantly iconic look with those characters' shaky outlines, the small but strong cast of characters, and the cozy setting taking place in a cul-de-sac made it a smashing success. The ramped-up violence of the show also made it something I couldn't watch when I was younger alongside the grim adventures of Billy and Mandy. Funny story, as I've said before, I pretended to learn swear words from Ed, Edd, and Eddy so I wouldn't get in trouble for playing Shadow the Hedgehog. But the only reason I was able to watch shows like Ed, Edd, and Eddy was because one episode of Billy and Mandy had Fred Flintstone in it, and me and my brother convinced our mom to let us watch it since, look, it's Fred Flintstone, he's never done anything bad!
We participated in a genocide, Barney.
Real comic, can't stress enough, this is a real comic, you can buy it, you should, it's good! Ed, Edd, and Eddy pretty much had the best run a cartoon can ask for, going on for 10 years and 6 seasons at... Oh no, that can't be right, please don't be right! Danny, you dirty son of a gun! And a feature-length film that wrapped up the story in a nice little bow. Today, it's the longest-running Cartoon Network original series, and is still remembered and beloved to this very day. It also had a game like, Jesus, you know some games just come out, like, look at the Wikipedia page, they're really stretching for time, go over the plot of every level, keep this on hand, you might get lost. So this game doesn't really try to have an overarching story in the same way the show did. Almost everything the Eds do is just to get jawbreakers. Instead of a regular plot, each level of the game plays out like it was an episode of the show, usually broken up into 3 or so segments depending on what's happening. Starting the game with Cool Year Ed, and the game goes for animated cutscenes, except instead of being hand-drawn like the original show, they're done in Flash. No disrespect meant to Flash, I mean, I dedicated a whole video to singing its praises, but Ed, Edd, and Eddy doesn't really work without constant motion that's just not here. They at least got the outlines right, but I feel like I'm seeing a teacher at a grocery store. You don't belong here! Speaking of things that shouldn't be seen, 3D Ed Boys! See, there are some characters that just don't transition to 3D, you stay in that motherfucking corner, you rat think Look at Fairly Odd Parents. 2D, fun show with an instantly recognizable and stylized look. 3D, sleep paralysis Muppet. Ed, Edd, and Eddy is one such show. I give them credit for going for cell shading, and it's pretty accurately getting those messy lines right, but one look at the fact that Jimmy's hair sits on top of his head, people's mouths look like they're about to rip like the stitches on a doll, and the war zone that is Eddy's entire body, and you start to thank God these guys aren't real. So for this level, we gotta get ice to make snow cones to sell to the other kids. Here we get introduced to the gameplay. Is it too much for me to just say Sonic Hero's a knockoff for a nap? So you control one Ed at a time and the other two follow you. Each Ed has their own traits and abilities that you can use to progress in the level. Moreover, the first 3 levels are pretty much dedicated to a specific Ed to get you used to how they work. This is Ed's level, so it's absolutely about brute force. Ed has a lot of positives over the other Eds. For instance, he has the funniest walk cycle. He's got a head bash, can dig in sand pits, and has a special move, the battering Ed. You're gonna want to get used to the kinda weird and loose controls of the battering Ed, since you're gonna be using it more than you ever walk in this game. It's super fast, blows right through most boxes and enemies, and its only downside being that if you crash, it takes a while to get up and go. There's a reason that most speedruns of this game come down to just being able to use the battering Ed well. It's the best of the 3 Ed abilities and the answer to most of the game's problems. Like catching the chicken, which made at least 3 appearances in every episode. Why don't you remember the chicken, fake fan? This is just a little challenge that can net you some Easter eggs. They're simple little changes to the game. I don't think we should really dwell on them. As for the level itself, you primarily use Ed to stun enemies and then throw them. You use a cat to distract a dog, which really shows you why there was only like 2 animals in the show. This is just a hairy bag. Or throwing squirrels into this incredibly weird window. Like, the inside is a real room, but it's not the room you're looking at. It's just textured to look like it is and moves around like a Soul Calibur background. This is some non-Euclidean shit right here. After flushing out Sarah and Jimmy and getting all the ice they need, the Eds just have to ball it, and they go to use Rolf's meatballer to do it. Except he doesn't want to let us, so it looks like it's time for this son of a shepherd to have a little accident. Under mysterious circumstances, the gate to his pigsty breaks, and being the noble friends we are, we round them all back up, at the price of using his baller, of course. That's no issue, and just like that, level over. It's super short, but it'd be really cruel to make this children's game's first level anything other than a cakewalk. Also, was I the only one who was grossed out by the fact that these balls were brown? At best, unsanitary, at worst, they probably taste like hot dog water. So after throwing up a little bit in our mouths, we get sent to the hub. Yeah, just like Battle for Bikini Bottom or Simpsons Hit and Run, Miss Edventures lets us roam around a classic cartoon locale in all of its glory. Except unlike those games, the cul-de-sac really does not have much worth exploring for. It's mostly just a couple of hallways that lead you to the levels, and the only thing of note is the cutscene viewer and the Jawbreaker machine. Oh, look at that, I have 3 Jawbreakers. Next level takes us to Jimmy's party, and after maliciously destroying everything he owns and shoving a squirrel down his throat, this prima donna doesn't want to let us in. Oh, he has no idea quite how petty I can be. So instead of taking the high road, we go down low to the sewers to bust in and crash it. This is where you really learn how much you need the battering Ed. This level is mostly long straightaways, and instead of walking all the way there, you can use the battering Ed to smash everything in your way. This includes random barrels of toxic radiation. These were the causes of a horrible realization I came to recently. Did you know they aren't filled with sludge? It's mostly just concrete and other stuff that can't be poured onto you to give you fantastical powers. It's just a barrel of angry rocks. That heavy Ed focus really takes away from the fact that this is supposed to be a double D level. You get to use his main 3 abilities, those being the Trample Ed, which lets you get to higher platforms, his water balloons, which can be used like a first-person shooter that I always wanted the franchise to be, and hacking, which lets you bypass doors. Trample Ed is used a lot in this level and shows just how unwieldy and finicky it can be. Next room over, and sometimes I've said that certain things in videos took an embarrassing amount of time to figure out. Most of that translates to about 4 or 5 minutes on a puzzle that should have taken 1. I say this to quantify me saying that this is the most embarrassing amount of time I've ever spent on a game. Mistaking this water balloon target for a hacking one stole 10 minutes of my life. 10 minutes I could have used to learn a trade or kiss a cute girl, were instead spent running around like a chicken with its head cut off who wasn't very good at video games. This hallway lets Ed kill an impressive number of rats for a growing boy before we get to a room with a locked door that needs us to turn a valve to open it. Awesome, let me get right to that, there's no valve. Luckily, delectable sewer baby Johnny and Plank just so happen to fish one up. Instead of giving it to me, which would be nice, he doesn't, which is not nice. He won't cough it up until we lower the water level so they can go clam fishing. So while we go around, we not only have to avoid the lovable PG perverts, the Canker Sisters, but also the clams Johnny wants to catch in the first place. Them and a few other enemies in the game have the nasty trait of instead of just attacking you and calling it a day, they stick to you and deal damage over time. How do you get them off? Science still doesn't have an answer. It puts you in the standard hit stun too, which means that simple things like carrying objects or living a happy life are impossible. So to get back at Johnny for holding the valve hostage, we take Plank hostage and threaten to feed him to the killer clams. Trust me, they're no joke, they just got one of Double D's fingers. We get what we need and hightail it to the surface. Next up is using the Trample Ed to smash up piñatas. After showing Jimmy what he was missing by not inviting us into his home, the Canker Sisters return to do things that would not have flied if the genders were swapped. The only way to fight back is using Double D Eddie's slingshot to knock down beehives onto them. I'm still not sure I got this section down, since not only are you only ever hitting the Manic Pixie Dream Girl one, but the other two are constantly popping up to hit you with Kissel missiles. If there's a way to get them to stop, I certainly couldn't find it. Sometimes their attacks whiff, but it's not in a way I can actually replicate. In the last one of these segments, I can't even hit Marie. She just leaves her hiding spot randomly with her weird little crab scuttle before we finally finish the level. It's the best part of the day. Time for a new level in Ed, and Eddy, the Misadventures on GameCube. This time, the candy store is giving away free jawbreakers, and this is basically our only chance to get one. This is the Eddy Spotlight level, showing off his abilities like the Tower of Ed, which lets all three Eds cross narrow platforms. Or if you're industrious like me, you realize you don't need your friends and jump over to the other side on our own. The game does soft lock you and make you have to go back and pick up the other Eds if you want to progress. Oh, son, don't you think you should apologize to the game for ruining its fun? Eddy is the most limited and least fun to play as Ed. At least Double D has a lot of things he can do. Sections where you need to use the Tower of Ed are just balancing acts that are more so tests of patience rather than skill. Most of the level is just simple puzzles, and by simple I mean another one that stumped me for way too long for the letter on the box. I swear I went to college! I am so glad that 100%ing Misadventures isn't on the finals. At the end of the road as a Skinwalker. People talk about Sonic having a rough transition to 3D. What about Kevin? He tasks us with knocking down some trash cans to prove we aren't sissies, so he'll let us pass. Clearly he's erected a psychic barrier that will stop us in our tracks. If I ever man up and go to therapy, I'll probably end up telling the doctor that this is the reason I had a messed up childhood. This section seems easy, just knock over the trash cans, but lining up the right shot is so nerve-wracking and is impossible to wrangle in the right direction. It's even worse when you only have one left standing and you just keep on missing. Secret pro tip from a 10-year vet of playing Misadventures: you can also use the trash cans you knock over more like a dirty, cheating freak. Seems like I got the buzzer beater win here, but sadly the game wasn't feeling merciful and counted it as a loss and called me a horrible slur. This is also one of those games where a cutscene plays every time you restart a segment, which at least has some comedy factor.
Well, if it isn't dork, and dorky.
No. After that, we have to get past some bees using honey that selfish little piggy Johnny is hogging. Just use the water balloons to cave Johnny's head in and murder him with bees. Once we finally get to the store, we get the jawbreakers, only to find out they're made of poison, and Eddy has a deadly allergy to poison. We have to hide Eddy's face until we get home so he can die a dignified death, or else the embarrassment will kill him before the poison does. This is the stealth segment of the game. Sneak around and make sure you don't get seen. The Tower of Ed allows us to hide behind telephone poles, and Eddy can hide in boxes to avoid detection. I switched to Smallhead to try to help us hide. On the way back, we get to retread old ground and distract the other kids. Sometimes it's with the box, sometimes telephone poles, sometimes throwing cans of paint at their head with laser accuracy. Alright, classic kid stuff. That's a pretty alright section. I'm not stuck on anything for a day and a half, and there's a pretty clear indication on when you're in an enemy's line of sight so you don't get caught unaware. I thought the section where you have to sneak behind the moving tractor was pretty clever for this game. Alright, all our efforts were completely pointless and we complete the level. On to level 4. Jeez, Jack, we're already halfway through the game. If you weren't so nice, I'd say that you massively overestimated how much there would be to talk about in this game until this point. With deadlines encroaching, you couldn't pivot games and had to make do with this one. Yeah. For this one, we're tasked with completing an obstacle course to get a Junior Urban Rangers badge to keep it out of Kevin's hands. Seeing as we're all caught up on the Ed's playstyles, this level is where you put them all to good use. Not only do you have to use Ed's throwing and batter Ed, but the other two are there too. I kid, but honestly, this level, like almost every other one, gives Ed the biggest focus. You'll need to use Double D to knock down new platforms and Eddy to fall off them, but overall it's pretty obvious that Ed was meant to be used the most. And it's not like you'd want to use the other ones anyway, since Eddy's balancing act is frustrating for how he always manages to slip off whatever platform you're trying to cross. Made even worse later on in the level when you have to carry stuff while walking over these tight ropes. In this section, we need to play whack-a-mole with Jimmy's head, so to gain a tactical advantage, I give Ed a big head so he's more likely to hit them. After that is a run to go get batteries to power a generator. This will not only test your ability to carry while stuck in the Tower of Ed, but also test if you can pass puzzles made for children, which I can't when I drop the green battery in the orange slot, because where there should be basic problem solving, my brain just has Sonic trivia. Crossword puzzles are out of my wheelhouse, but if you ever want to know how to get to the Sonic Adventure 2 test levels, I'm your man. I continue to show why they call me Jack. Can't seem to do anything right for the life of him last name when I run into a booby trap without triggering it, and then fall into the trap again when the trap is actually triggered. Honestly, the fact I've managed to write this script is a miracle. Slot all the batteries in and you're on your way to the next part of the level. I also got 69 cents, and somewhere in Canada, Danny Antonucci stopped eating and said, "Yes! F*** America!"
America, you know?
And you're Canadian, right?
Now, if you want to continue down the path, we gotta lock horns with Victor, Rolf's goat. Tubular. Anyway, to finish the level, you have to beat Kevin in a race to the end of the track. It's like this track was built by kids or something. It's falling apart. Just duck and weave, or weave and duck, it doesn't matter to me, and you're gonna make it to the end with no problem, as in Kevin wouldn't even come close if you gave him a head start and walk past the finish line. On to the next level, and Jimmy's stuffed animal Mr. Yum Yum is missing, and the Eds are on the case to find him in an old abandoned house. Seems pretty easy, but we get locked in there with the child-friendly sex pests, the cankers, who are holding the doll hostage. So we have to go get presents for the 3 types of girls that every guy develops a thing for very early in life thanks to this show. The mansion is big, empty, and most importantly, boring. You have to trek so deep into it at some points to find the items you're looking for, and sometimes it's really hard to tell where you need to go. Not to mention you have to carry them a long way while avoiding damage. This gets ridiculous as the level goes on. I'm not even sure I completed half these segments how I was supposed to, but I still beat the game, so joke's on them, I guess. Instead of talking about how this level feels like a surgical drill being inserted into the side of your head, I want to go over something positive, the presentation. This game perfectly emulates the show, better than most licensed games, especially for the time. The environments look dead on to the show's style. The character models, well, Eddy, do strongly emulate the show's original style. The show never looked perfect, so why should the game? The soundtrack sounds right out of an episode, using a lot of songs and sound effects from the show itself, and there's no need to tell you how iconic those are. Best of all, though, is the return of the original voice cast. There are no Mr. Krabs in this game, the whole cast is back, and they sound perfect, from the Ed boys, Sarah, Jimmy, Kevin, and Rolf. Fun fact for those who don't know, Rolf is voiced by Peter Clemens, who also voices Goku in the Blue Ocean dub of Dragon Ball.
Have you ever experienced the almighty 3 shelf eating?
You know, it turns out I do want to talk about that drilling. You have to get this goblet across this wooden board. The obstacle is supposed to be this candelabra, but it's really gravity we're beefing with. I cannot stay on this platform to save my life, but what's worse is when I just drop the goblet because the forces of the universe decide I haven't earned it yet and knock me off for no reason. Once I get across, I do what I absolutely know is wrong and get across with just Ed holding the present. This leaves the other 2 high and dry while I run back all the way through the level to give it before offing myself to get my other friends back. It's only a 2-minute walk, but to the ADHD-riddled sugar addicts and 21-year-olds playing this game, it feels like an eternity. Wow, Jack, breaking a game and then complaining about how broken it is? That's a whole new low! After getting Double D and Eddy back, the last step is to use the Tower of Ed to get up to the top of the library. The boards are more than an atom thick, so I have a much better time crossing them. There is one time where I simply walk too fast into a corner and die a violent death as a result, but honestly, I probably had it coming. I got the final gift and Mr. Yum Yum back in less than mint condition, but vivisection builds character. Chin up! On my way to the next level, I decided to check out some of the collectibles that I've gotten over the course of the game. We get a quick slideshow of the Ed's voice actors recording their lines, which reveals that Eddy's voice actor looks exactly how you'd expect him to. We also got the Best Friend Plank music video, which inspired me to make my very own best friend out of an old house shingle when I was younger. When a character in a cartoon does it, it's funny. When a real kid does it, it's sad. No time for childhood trauma, it's time for something even more important. The final level of Ed, Edd and Eddy the Misadventures. We finally got the jawbreakers we wanted, but they end up stolen, and the only thing to help us find them is a snippet of a map. Gotta go find the rest, and that leads us to a junkyard. All you gotta do is find the pieces, but the process to getting them is a little more than just difficult. It's downright painful. First things first is to get batteries to open a door. Not hard, but pretty tedious since you do all of the moving in the Tower of Ed, and that moves at a snail's pace. By the time we get there, it's gonna be tax season. Get a move on! After that, we get our first scrap of map by launching Johnny into low orbit and disabling an electric fence. From there, all we gotta do is disable a lock while being chased by every single enemy in the game, and we get to Jimmy, who has a piece of the map, who will give it up for a jawbreaker. As retribution, we do the most horrible thing possible by shoving a sack of spider eggs down his throat till they start crawling out his eyes. Of course, it's not just Tower of Ed tightrope walking, but the brief respite between tightropes has mud, which has all of its friction removed by... no, I don't know, let's say Naz. We force a million spiders down Jimmy's esophagus and get the next part of the map. I know for a fact this can't be how this part of the game is handled, but I'm stumped on how to do it any other way, so whatever. The final piece of the map is held by Rolf, who challenges you to a rematch with Victor for it. You remember how we're still stuck on the last Victor fight? Gnarly. So we get the map, and it turns out that the wholesome predators, the Kanker sisters, have them. So we track them down to their evil underground sewer lair where we only have so much time to get to them before we're branded losers. That time, by the way, is more than enough since you get more time every time you die, which is going to be often since there are multiple times where you need to use the Tower of Ed, which is always going to get you killed. After getting through the tunnels, we find the cankers atop a big electrified pile of trash firing deadly love at us. Welcome to the first boss of the game! Welcome to the last boss of the game! All we have to do is use Ed to throw a barrel at the targets, use Ed to knock down the platforms, and then use Ed to accept all the adulation. The main annoying thing is that you spend most of the fight carrying stuff, so you're a sitting duck for the kisses, and all the squirrels which, like the other enemies, latch onto you and make you drop whatever you're carrying. It's not hard, but it's really weird that the last boss isn't a combination of all the Eds, it's just Ed doing what he's been doing the whole game, and carrying the rest of the team. We escape with the Jawbreakers only to be caught in a chapel and brutally faded to black by the cankers. Roll credits! So, I know exactly why I like this game. It's because I'm a fan of the show and I played it when I was younger. I like all the nods and jokes hidden in places like the Jawbreaker descriptions. I like the presentation and the general structure of the game. And I forgive a lot of things about it for that fact. Someone who doesn't have any attachment would probably call it a mediocre to bad puzzle platformer with shoddy physics and only 6 levels for a full-price game that can be beaten in less than 3 hours. Luckily, I'm not that guy, so if anybody hasn't played it who likes Ed and Eddy and wants to check it out, or if you just have a soft spot for old licensed games, give it a look, you can do a lot worse. After course correcting Nickjune into the universally beloved and revered Cartjune Network, I can't wait to finish out the month strong with Come on. No. Oh, son of a